Welcome everyone, and thank you for your attention during this presentation. My name is Andras Farkas. By trade, I am a pharmacist specialized in infectious diseases and work at Mount Sinai West Hospital within the Mount Sinai Health System in New York City. In addition, I'm also the lead developer of individually designed optimum dosing strategies, or ID-ODS, the open access software designed for therapeutic dose optimization of antimicrobial agents, the general overview of which is the focus of this presentation. Our objectives for this presentation include a brief description of the history and evolution of ID-ODS during the last decade, also an illustration of the architecture and computational background providing the support for simulations in ID-ODS, then a demonstration of the basic functionalities of ID-ODS user interface, and last, a brief explanation of the various outputs and plots generated by ID-ODS. Just a few words about our core team, and you already know who I am. Another instrumental members of the ODS team are Dr. Ashina Yasin, also an infectious diseases clinical pharmacist, and she leads our effort on clinical education and customer solutions. Dr. Christina Woods, board-certified infectious disease physician whose focus is on clinical applications, while Shana Morey, who is a certified pharmacy technician, works to maximize efforts on user experience and is also the application tester. As I have mentioned, ID-ODS is a simulation tool for use by individual users or institutions. ID-ODS supports probabilistic forecasting and Bayesian adaptive feedback powered by the R software with a model library built from published population pharmacokinetic models. Most models are written in analytical equations, but some use R's validated and standard differential equation solver, the package of Dissolve. For inverse modeling, sometimes referred to as Bayesian adaptive feedback, ID-ODS uses functions provided by the validated R package FME, or Flexible Modeling Environment. The application's front end is provided by Shiny, a package that makes it relatively easy to design interactive web apps powered by the R software. Authors of this package also provide a hosting environment for web apps called Shiny Apps IO, which is where we stream ID-ODS from. ID-ODS is also equipped to communicate with standard databases, which become important in user experience, as it allows for the saving of data input from past simulations and provides the basis for reporting functionalities. All models built into ID-ODS are derived from published, validated pharmacokinetic models that are updated as new and meaningful information is added to the medical literature. The history of ID-ODS goes back to as early as 2013, when the idea for the need to develop a point-of-care software solution for dose optimization surfaced. The small team we had during the first 2 years of focus was to develop the basic functionalities for both the front and back end, with emphasis on automated calculations. Then later, relaxing the constraints of some of the functionalities to allow for greater degree of user participation in the outcomes of the simulations. In parallel, we also began to seek exposure and participated in core meetings in the area of science related to anti-infectives worldwide, with the aim of sharing ideas and receive feedback on our efforts of application development. Throughout the years, we have presented multiple meeting abstracts and posters and participated in the publication of peer-reviewed manuscripts describing the use of dose optimization softwares, including ID-ODS. As time went by, we added drug modules and made significant updates to the front and back end. In early 2018, we chose to fully remodel the user interface and added significant functionalities for the database management. Late 2019, we have met roadblocks we were unable to overcome, and which has led to a straight road back to the drawing board and resulted in the redesign, the whole system, and focus on conversion to the Shiny Race front and back. This new direction enables us to easily incorporate new functionalities like renal replacement therapy, interactive plots, and allow for swift expansion of the system to include pediatric models. So in its current state, the system of ID-ODS is described generally by this picture. The user would access the system in any modern browser on any device, where ID-ODS was tested in these specific browsers with satisfactory results. It is also usable on mobile devices, where for phones we suggest to use the desktop site functionality of that particular browser at this time. Our developmental efforts mainly focus on ensuring compatibility with Google's Chrome browser, hence that is the one we most recommend. Once the user accesses the system, the flow of information is directed to the service hosting ID-ODS, called ShinyApps.io. This is a scalable system allowing for multiple users to access the system at the same time. Important to know that in the free open access design, if two users were to try to use the system at the exact same time, then the user who interacts with the system first will be given the priority in the simulations, while the user clicking on a simulation button next will be queued in and will be served after the results for the first user is presented, resulting in a bit of extra simulation time. Our efforts, of course, in the backend is to maximize user experience, but important to know that this is a dynamic process closely associated with actual traffic the system is subjected to at the same time. Next, the system interacts with our databases and store user preferences and past entries for patient profiles. Approximately 30% of the modules currently have this functionality built in, with full expansion expected by the end of this year. Once the user generates a simulation output for a new unique profile, it will be saved in the database and available for reload and editing in the future. Please be aware that all unique patient profiles that were not used for simulations in the past 14 days will be automatically purged from the system in the current open access module and moved to the database that collects inactive profiles. While housed on the password protected databases, all data is kept encrypted using the sodium encryption standard. After interacting with the database, the information then flows back to the system where the calculations happen to produce the output plots that eventually are presented in the browser for the user. While the information travels, it is protected by SSL, the current standard technology for keeping an internet connection secure and safeguarding any sensitive data that is being sent between two systems. The system of ID-ODS does not conform to current HIPAA standards at this time. Now that we have a general understanding of the history and the infrastructure supporting ID-ODS, why don't we take a look at the actual application itself? To access the application online, go to optimumdosingstrategies.org, where ID-ODS can be found under this menu item here. At present time, and pending full conversion from the previous version, we have these antibiotics for adults and the pediatric modules. The most advanced module is the adult vancomycin one, so we will use that as an example to demonstrate the functionalities. Once on the page, please be aware that depending on the status of the server, loading of the application may take up to 5 to 7 seconds initially. To gain access to the application, the prospective user would register using this blue button here. Then access will be granted within 5 business days, as indicated by an email notification from ID-ODS. Once logged in, the profile manager will be presented, allowing for the selection of previously analyzed profiles to be loaded or to start entry for a new patient. We will select new entry at this time and move on to entering the unique ID for our patient. It is generally considered best practice not to use spaces in unique IDs to avoid computational mishaps, so we can use something like an underscore instead. Once the ID is specified, the user will be presented with the time offset adjuster. This functionality allows for correction of the time difference of your geographic location on the planet versus the UTC time, or Coordinated Universal Time, a standard time to which all the date and time values are converted by ID-ODS. This value for Brisbane, Australia would be a -10, whereas for New York, which is where I am at, it will be a +4. Some useful features of ID-ODS are documented greater in details, access to which is provided by these purple icon of info buttons. We have them embedded in multiple forms in multiple locations. Please be sure to click on them, as for the interest of time and this presentation, we will skip over them. By design, some of ID-ODS's controls and input fields are presented as drop-down or fly-in forms, like this one, allowing for the input of demographic variables and other covariates. In general, data entered under this location are implemented as fixed variables whose value do not change over time, versus variables that change over time would be entered under the type drop-down button here. Going around in a clockwise fashion, the next button to control input fields is the steady-state dosing regimens. This form is used to enter regimens to be evaluated during steady-state dose optimization. As an example, let us enter a few dosing regimens like 1000 milligram every 12 hours over 1 hour infusion, 1250 milligrams every 12 hours over 1 hour infusion, 1500 milligrams again every 12 hours over 1.5 hour infusion time. This form, like many others in ID-ODS, allow for the download of inputted parameters into a CSV file that can later be uploaded for use in future simulations. Moving to the next control, on the top is the conventional unit to metric system conversion form, where the user has the option to specify units of measures specific to a particular patient. Also, if you find yourself needing to adjust time of set after the initial login, you could do that here. Second to last control button gives access to the simulation controls and other features designed to support variation in the outputs produced by the ID-ODS. The number of subjects slider determines the number of subjects to be simulated for during Monte Carlo simulation. Next, the data points to plot control allows for more details to be presented in the plot outputs, where higher number will result in time points to be plotted more frequently on the output plots. You may also set functionality to advanced from basic, where we will focus on demonstrating the basic functionalities during this presentation. And also, users may specify to fit either unbound or free concentrations versus total concentrations, depending on the particular measurements established in your lab. The remaining 4 controls, namely iterations, sequential analysis, distribution, and between subject variability, are user adjustable settings designed to improve upon model fit and enhance the Bayesian feedback-based modeling experience, functions of which we will look at a bit more closely, starting with sequential analysis. We can use this toy example to demonstrate the advantages of using sequential analysis as one measure to mitigate model fit implemented in ID-ODS. In this example, a patient was started on 1250 milligrams vancomycin at 12 hours intervals with baseline creatinine of 70 millimole per liter. A trough level measured prior to the 4th dose resulted in a value of 12.3 milligram per liter. At this time, the decision was to continue current regimen and repeat level a few doses later. Prior to the 9th dose, a concentration measurement showed supratherapeutic levels at 24.3 milligram per liter and a creatinine value of 215 millimole per liter. Dose was decreased to 500 milligrams every 12 hours, then continued for 7 more doses, where before the 8th dose of the 500 milligram, a concentration measure yielded a value of 8 milligram per liter. On this plot, we show the results of analysis of the concentration time profile while setting sequential analysis to no. In other words, the sequential analysis is not applied and all the data is fitted at once. In this case, ID-ODS will analyze the time profile from time 0 to and until the third concentration measurement on this plot, indicated by the green arrow. This will yield one pair of pharmacokinetic parameters for elimination and volume distribution, and these parameters will be used in the steady-state calculations. As you can see, based on visual evaluation of the model fit, the fit is not optimal. For the most part, an optimal fit is identified visually when the predicted concentrations, indicated by the black line, would cross through the center of the measured concentration, indicated by the blue dot on this plot. To mitigate results of a suboptimal fit, the user may combine 4 specific steps implemented in ID-ODS, one of which is to allow for sequential analysis to take place. Once switching sequential analysis to yes, ID-ODS will analyze the profile in sequences, where first we will fit all the data from time 0 and until the first measured concentration. Then from the first concentration till the second concentration, then the rest of the profile would get fitted. During the sequential analysis, for each chunk of the profile, ID-ODS will calculate a separate pair of pharmacokinetic parameters, and we'll use only the last set for predicting future steady-state concentrations. This is a very useful feature in patients with changing physiologic variables known to impact the pharmacokinetic parameters, as it allows for a parallel change of PK parameters over time. This is often the case in the ICU patients, and besides the visual improvement in the model fit we can identify on this plot, using this approach to better track concentrations is also supported by published literature. A side effect of this method could be that the software may identify a change when in reality there is no change, and for those cases, disabling the feature by selecting no is a reasonable step. Besides sequential analysis, changing parameter distribution, increasing number of iterations, and inflating between subject variance are another 3 ways to improve upon the fit and participate in a higher level of modeling experience. The distribution select input serves the purpose of relaxing constraints set by the probability distribution applied during the fitting procedure. ID-ODS is a parametric software and uses the normal distribution as the standard for fitting procedure. Published pharmacokinetic models and respective parameters will be coded into ID-ODS using the derived mean and standard deviation values as described in the literature. So when fitting a model onto a dataset specific to a patient, one of the assumptions we make is that the pharmacokinetic model, in this case the mean and the standard deviations for the parameters we are trying to fit, was derived from a population that is representative of our patient. Sometimes, and this is especially evident in my experience for vancomycin in morbidly obese patients or young male adults with unusually high vancomycin clearance, the general population pharmacokinetic models may not be able to optimally be fitted using the published parameters, resulting in a suboptimal fit similar to that we saw with the patient in changing renal function. To mitigate this, we may change the probability distribution type from normal distribution, where the assumption according to this plot on the left is that the clearance value for our patients should fall near 5 liters based on the probability density of the distribution, having most values near and around 5 liters, to a uniform distribution where all values are equally likely on the scale, from the lowest clearance value to the highest clearance value. The way ID-ODS takes advantage of this is that it allows the system to look more closely, so to say, at values that are otherwise would be towards the tail ends of the normal distribution. This way, it is more likely to be able to find a larger VD value for a morbidly obese patient or a larger clearance value for the young male hospitalized patient. And last, to take modeling to a different level, the user may choose to select higher number of iterations to have ID-ODS try a bit harder by increasing the number of trials when searching of the optimized parameters, or to inflate the between subject variability and alter the shape of the probability distribution. As I mentioned it on the previous slide, models are coded into ID-ODS using a parametric approach. Besides changing the distribution to uniform from normal, an additional approach we can try to reach some of those towards the tail end PK parameters in the distribution space is to inflate the standard deviation of the published pharmacokinetic model. This way, we will maintain the constraints set forth by the published literature. In other words, we continue to work with a normal shape distribution as assumed in most parametric pharmacokinetic model publications, but allow for the expansion of the space to find those values. As you can see on the plot on the right, after doubling the standard deviation of the normal distribution and keeping the mean the same, we have higher density of clearance values at 8 liters now than with the original uninflated standard deviation shown on the plot on the left. As a general workflow, we suggest to run the analysis initially with the built-in settings. Next, if the fit is not adequate, then increase the number of iterations. I'm unaware of a literature suggesting what may be the highest number beyond which there is no more chance for fit improvement. So in general practice, I jump from 500, which is the basic settings, to 10,000. As beyond that number, generally speaking, I observe not much additional benefit. After, if the fit is still not satisfactory, then inflate the between subject variability, and if more flexibility is needed, then use the uniform distribution, or mix all the modalities together. Be aware that with each of these steps you take, your trip away from reality towards the world of fantasy begins. As a result, in an increase in deviation from the model environment established in the original published literature, since by each step taken, a profound alteration of the original parameter space will take place. Back to the actual application, the last drop-down under the PK/PD setting gives access to users to select a particular method available for analysis from the structural components of the model's point of view, also to specify the pharmacodynamic target together with its magnitude of interest. At last, there are two input fields for entering MIC information. One is for single MIC settings and another one for the MIC distribution. Important to know that the MIC distribution information is only used when calculating cumulative fractional response or CFR, and everywhere else the single MIC input is used in the calculations. Next aspects of ID-ODS we should take a look at is in the input functionalities that support entry of time-varying or dependent parameters like dosing, concentrations, and other time-varying covariates like creatinine to support correlation of renal function to drug elimination. After selecting the data type and inputting a specific value for that, we can add either a single data element or by clicking on the Quick Add button, multiple input values at standard intervals can be also inputted and implemented. Please know that the buttons that control the initiation of the simulation routines are disabled until sufficient data types are added to the table that are minimally necessary for the simulations. For the empiric dosing routine, a creatinine value is sufficient in the case of vancomycin, while for the Bayesian analysis, we will need a creatinine, a dose, and a concentration input type entered. Once these constraints are satisfied, the buttons get activated. Few words about the data table in the plot below. The data table is sortable, and some columns, like the value column field, are editable. And you can also deselect rows when needed, resulting in the removal of the particular data point from analysis without the need to actually delete the entry. This plot on the bottom of the screen is designed to give users a high-level overview of the various data points and allow for easier detection of inadvertent entry error. Simulations are initiated by clicking on the representative buttons. So for an empiric regimen, we would click the empiric button. That will set the calculations to begin, where the red bar on the top of the application indicates to the user that simulations are in progress. We'll take a couple of seconds for the plots to be presented, resulting in the main output types for empiric dosing approach that are either the usual probability of target attainment plots, well known from published literature, where the PTAs at each MICs are presented for a particular regimen, which we have built in for mostly for the beta-lactams, or a summary of a dose-wise concentration time profile plot, where summary statistics of predicted concentration can be viewed at various time points. Combined with a dose or day-wise, 24-hour-wise in case of vancomycin, probability of target attainment for the empiric dosing regimen. To support a more detailed and visual examination of all these plots can be magnified with these buttons here and also zoomed upon as needed. When analyzing via the Bayesian adaptive feedback, the user will be presented with this table of candidate dosing regimens to be evaluated for optimal target attainment using the patient-specific pharmacokinetic parameters. Similar to before, the rows of the table can be selected and unselected, where the lack of selecting a specific regimen will result in the system evaluating all of them listed in this table and will present the optimal regimen that yields the pharmacodynamic target exposure using the lowest total daily milligram dose required. Output plots of the Bayesian analysis are also interactive, allowing for the inspection of concentration time profile and can be magnified like before and zoomed upon as needed. Hovering over the bars in the middle plot allows for visual examination of the numerical value for the achieved in gray and predicted pharmacodynamic exposure with the purple bars, and is the analysis of the results presented in the plot above. The bottom plot provides information on select dosing regimens being near or within the pre-specified pharmacodynamic target, which can be useful to evaluate target attainment of additional dosing regimens at steady state without the need to repeat the simulations. Last but not least, a user-driven functionality to simulate irregular dosing regimens as opposed to steady state predictions is provided under the Bayes 2 button. Once activated, this form is presented to the user to specify irregular dosing regimens, where the table cells can be easily edited and any kind of future profiles can be simulated using the previously stored patient-specific pharmacokinetic parameters. Where the plots outputs are very similar to what we have observed before. After completion of the simulation routines, the system automatically saves the profile for future use, which can be retrieved at a later time for analysis. And selecting this functionality, where there is our saved patient's information. With this, we arrived at the conclusion of this presentation. Once again, would like to thank you for your attention and would be happy to answer any questions you may have.